Hi folks, and welcome to the Meaningful Money Podcast. This is Season 17, Episode 9. This is the podcast dedicated to helping you put your finances in order. My name is Pete Matthew, and I'm going to share with you everything you need to know and everything you need to do to secure your financial future. I'm here to help you make sense of money. Here we are once again. Great to have you with me. Thank you so much for joining me. We're continuing the cheery theme of thinking about what happens when we snuff it today. And I want to begin a two-part megasode diving into estate planning. Okay, so this week we're going to lay the groundwork on which to build next week. Megasode, this is. I think I might have made that up. I nicked the word in-between-isode from Tim Ferriss and his amazing podcast. Don't think I've heard megasode before. Should I copyright it, or should I never use it again? Anyway, after the main body of the show, we're going to look at the most recent review that's been left for the podcast, and that's what we're going to be talking about next week as usual. But as ever, before anything, this podcast continues to be brought to you with the help of my friends at 7 Investment Management. Been helping me out here on Meaningful Money since spring of 2011, which is a very long time indeed. We're in the home straight to getting to a full decade of their support, which is just astonishing. So I'm super grateful to them for doing that. Please do check out what they're up to. They're at 7im.co.uk. That's the number 7im.co.uk. And this podcast is also brought to you by Meaningful Academy, which is the best place to learn how to take control of your finances, whether you're just starting out or whether you're seriously on the path to building wealth. Everything you need to know is at meaningfulacademy.com. Meaningfulacademy.com, a little bit more on that at the end of the show, but go check it out. Okay, so after a life spent first building and then enjoying wealth, if there's anything left, we'll probably end up thinking about how best to pass that on to the next generation or to the causes that we care about. And so we're talking now about leaving a legacy when we're gone, and the choices we make with that can just have massive repercussions for our families. You know, this is important, so we're going to take our time over it. Like I say, real meat next week, but we need to lay some groundwork first. And so remember, notes and links from today's show, they're at the show notes, which is the only link you need to remember. meaningfulmoney.tv/RP9 for retirement planning episode 9. meaningfulmoney.tv/RP9. Also listen out for a 20% discount code for a service which will get your will written a little bit later on. Okay, so first let's have a look at what you need to know. Okay, right. First thing you need to know is that you are the starting point of all this. Okay, so right at the top here, I want to hammer home the point that estate planning, legacy planning, whatever you want to call it, it starts with you. It is your legacy. It is your estate that we're talking about. If I had £1 for every time somebody has asked me while I've been talking about this subject, how much can I give away? All right, that gets asked all the time. How much can I give away? And I always respond with, well, all of it. And then they'll look at me sort of funny and they'll clarify that what they actually are asking is, you know, about gift exemptions. So how much can they give away within the rules for inheritance tax and stuff like that? But the point I always want to make is that you can do what you want with your own money. With legacy planning, we absolutely must start from the position of what we want to happen, right? That's where it all begins. Much more on that a bit later. But then, and only then, can we navigate the system and the rules to make what we want to happen in the most efficient way. Just as you shouldn't let the rules tail wag the legacy dog, if you like, you shouldn't let the tax tail wag it either. So that sometimes comes down to investment choices, which might have inheritance tax benefits. That sounds like a good idea in principle, but it's a golden rule that you should never do anything for tax reasons that you're not ordinarily happy with. Don't just do it for tax reasons, whereas in any other sort of situation, you wouldn't touch that investment with a barge pole. Remember, you are the starting point. What you want to happen is the most important thing, and then we can navigate the system. Second thing you need to know is that your needs come first. It's a natural function of parenthood that we want to look after our kids. Millions of years of evolution have mandated that. But again, in having conversations with clients over the years, I'm constantly having to remind parents and grandparents that their own needs come first. When we are planning in later life, we're using the context of a client's, in my case, we're using the context of their future needs to determine what, if anything, perhaps can be given away now. And even if a client isn't planning on making lifetime gifts, very often they'll look to perhaps not spend money that they could be enjoying because they want to leave it to the kids. And they usually get sort of short shrift from me, although it's usually delivered politely and with a smile. But, let's hammer this home. Your needs come first. You absolutely must look after number one. Third thing we need to know about legacy planning is that the only way to ensure that what you want to happen actually does happen is to write it down. We all understand that the laws of succession, actually that sounds like the royal family, which is not really what I'm after here, the laws of succession and how things pass down from generations through wills and legacies and estates and stuff, we know that those rules are complicated. There are centuries of previous cases that set precedents. Each successive government likes to tinker with the tax code, and so we end up with a pretty complex system. And we live within a system that requires that your wishes are written down, codified in some form. So again, let's be clear, just having a quiet word with your next of kin, what you'd like to happen, just isn't good enough. You have got to write this stuff down. Wording is important too. You can't just sort of scratch it out on the back of a fag packet and think that that'll probably okay. I've had loads of comments in the past that it is quite possible to write your own will, and it is, but one badly chosen word in the wrong place can open things up to interpretation, and that's crucial where the law is concerned, right? What you don't want is interpretation. What you're after really is absolute clarity with no grey area at all. And so a will writer's job is to translate your wishes into words which will stand up if challenged. Now, most of us don't have complex, massive estates with, hordes of greedy, twice-removed relatives clamoring for a share. And most of us have nice families that get along, right? But I've seen it too many times, folks. Nothing destroys families more quickly or more completely than arguments about money after the matriarch or patriarch has died. Clarity of wishes achieves multiple aims. It makes things unambiguous for those left behind, makes it easy for them to sort it all out. It saves time and money because it makes it easy for them. And it preserves family ties. And so for all those reasons and more, we got to make sure that our wishes are written down. Last thing we need to know, number 4, early planning leads to timely execution. In my experience, estate planning for a couple particularly really begins in earnest once the first partner dies. But that is often much later than it should be happening. Now, I understand, of course, nobody really wants to spend an evening by the fire talking about organising their wills or, who's going to get the family heirloom candlesticks or whatever. Much easier to kick that can down the road. But that isn't an intentional approach. And we like that word here on the Meaningful Money podcast. Like anything in life, we should be intentional and treat this as a project that we need to complete. There will be steps that are needed to be ticked off. As we complete it, we'll work through those steps one by one, and when they're all done, we can tick off the project, at least when it comes, until it comes time to review it. So the sooner you can consider this stuff, right, as much as you might want to put it off, the sooner you can do it, the more energy you'll have to devote to it, the easier it'll be to move forward with confidence, knowing that you don't have this big sort of unclosed loop hanging over you. If you think of all the energy that you put into building wealth so you can enjoy a happy and rich retirement, the financial planner doesn't stop there, right? And you are the financial planner in this case, right? Not the professional financial planner, but the person who is planning their finances, that's you, doesn't stop at the point of retirement or even in retirement. What happens is that we begin then to devote that same energy to making sure that the end game is properly planned and executed. Okay, so in case you're any doubt, just to tie this up here, you are the driver of this whole process. Yes, of course, you can use professionals to facilitate much of the mechanics of things, but you are in control and you should be the one pushing things along. So to that end then, let's look at what you need to do to get your legacy plans in place. Okay, number 1, everything you need to do is to plan. As ever, everything starts with planning. And for now, this means a fairly high-level overview of what you want to happen with your legacy. So set some time aside. I feel like I've asked you to do that a lot recently, right? But this is complicated, interesting, intricate stuff. But We have some time to use right now. Still not quite out of full lockdown. We've probably got some time on our hands, so let's make the most of it. Take the time to think through your legacy plans using the following sort of high-level prompts. People first. What do you want? Who do you want to leave money and assets to, and why? It's crucial to have a why, I think. Even if that why is fairly simple, because they're my kids and I love them, is a perfectly good why. But maybe you want to leave something specific to somebody. There may be a reason for that. Write it down if there is. Think about causes as well. Are there any other charities or other causes that you want to remember after you're gone? Maybe your church or synagogue or whatever, or your local sports club. It could be anything. Is there anything that you want to giving to after you've gone, or even while you're alive? So causes is an important thing to think about. Think about your assets too. Will you lump everything together, or will you consider gifting certain items to certain people? I got a client who has Disney shares that he's kind of ring-fenced to give to his granddaughter, for example. Many people have got heirlooms that they want to pass down to specific individuals. So think about assets, right? Both financial assets, of course, but actual physical assets, stuff in your house, heirlooms, cars even, whatever. Just think about the stuff you have and what you might want to do with it. Then think about timing. Do you want certain things to happen before or after you've gone? How about major events that might precipitate a gift, say, like a wedding or the birth of a grandchild? And as you think about these things, make some notes and start to build a picture. And don't go small either. Let any possibilities be weighed, okay? For instance, I've got a client, or had a client rather, he's gone now, who left his considerable wealth. After he looked after his family, he left a lot of money into a trust fund which was designed to provide bursaries for students who were studying in his field of expertise. So he used the money that he'd made while rising to the top of his field to develop future leaders in that same sphere. I thought that was very cool. Now, you might not feel that you've got the resources to do something like that, but maybe you could sponsor an award at your local college or university or sports club. Just all I'm saying is to think outside the box, okay? But this thinking process, this planning process, and the notes that it produces will form the basis for your planning. So you want to get as close as possible to a checklist of things that you want to happen, because then you can build the mechanism to make sure that all those things get ticked off. Okay, so plan first. Number 2, get the basics right. Okay, so the first port of call for getting your wishes enacted after you've gone is a will. We're going to talk about what you can do before you die a little bit more next week. So we'll deal with kind of the latter half of things, what happens when you're gone today, at least in part. So a will is a fairly simple document for most of us, and the format is much the same for everyone, with more or less detail depending on the complexity of your particular estate and your plans. So first of all, you declare all of your previous wills void. That's all fairly straightforward. Then you name your executors. And these are the people responsible for executing your wishes, so choose wisely. Usually, if you have a partner, you would name them, but it's best to choose at least one more executor. Crucially, it's important to remember that your executors don't actually have to do any executing, not really. They can delegate the whole process to a solicitor if they want to, but they do remain responsible and liable. They're the ones that have to sign the documents to the revenue and things like that. As a rule, unless you have literally nobody who can act as your executor that you trust, try to avoid appointing professional executors like solicitors and, heaven forbid, your bank. Amazing how often I still see that. You'll pay a lot more than is necessary simply because they then become liable if they are the executors. These days, many will charge a fixed fee, so it's not as bad as it used to be, but some will still charge an hourly rate, which is a bit of a blank check, let's face it. And worse, some will still charge a percentage of the estate, which is just nuts. Now, after you've named your executors, most people use a bit of space in their will to mention their basic funeral wishes. So you can be as detailed as you wish with this. You could just simply say that you want to be buried at sea. Or you could go into detail, of the hymns, poems, and pop songs that you want to be part of the service, ritual, rave, party, whatever it is you intend to throw to see yourself off. You could even designate the kind of quiche you want serving if you want to, but probably you'll put that stuff in a separate document for those who will be organising that, rather than clutter up your will with like a guest list or something. He and she can come, but don't let that nasty piece of work from down the road come to my funeral. Now we get to the important bit, though, starting with specific legacies. Now, strictly speaking, the terminology is that specific legacies are where you leave items to people, and pecuniary legacies are where you leave gifts of money. But, it doesn't that matter that much what the lingo says, but we're talking about specific stuff here. I want to leave X to Y type instructions, right? Those are your specifics. And once they are dealt with, we move on to the residuary estate, which simply means everything that's left, all right? Now, often there are still some quite definite instructions about property, even if it's only sell my property at 29 Acacia Road and lump the proceeds with the rest of my assets. Special prize if anybody knows the significance of that address, by the way. Usually then, leave a comment in the notes if you do. Usually, the instructions are simply to the effect of saying, look, lump everything together, divide it equally between my three kids, right? Or lump it all together, my wife gets it while she's alive, but after she's gone, it goes to the kids, or whatever. It's generally fairly simple because it's what's left, basically. We've dealt with the specifics, and then we've got what's left. That's generally it. Now, within each section, of course, we might have complications like setting up a trust, in which case you would lay out the scope of that trust across several paragraphs usually. But the pattern is mostly the same in a will because it's been honed to that shape over centuries. Now, I strongly urge you to get a will done professionally. These days, it is cheaper than ever to do so. You don't have to walk into a stuffy lawyer's office to do it. You can still do that, of course, and many solicitors' offices are not stuffy at all. And many will be happy to come see you at home to take your instructions for your will, COVID-19 permitting, of course. A will writer will write a perfectly good will, often at a lower cost than a full solicitor, and they've got full, PI insurance protection, all that sort of stuff. And finally, these days, there are some excellent online services. And to me, first among these is Fair Will. Okay, so check them out at fairwill.com. That's FAREWILL.com. I interviewed the CEO of Fair Will, a guy called Dan Garrett, a few weeks ago. I'll make sure there's a link to that conversation in the notes. He's a very interesting guy. And there's a lot they can do other than just writing wills. And they do it at an amazing cost. They're now writing 1 in every 10 wills in the UK. So they really are a force to be reckoned with, and as you would expect, they've got some pretty formidable legal brains behind what they're doing, so it's by no means a low-rent option. You even have the option with them to get your will done entirely online, so you put in your wishes, and then it gets looked at and drafted into a will and sent back to you, or you can speak with a human if you want to. Okay, it costs you a little bit more to do that, but not a lot more. So if you do go to Fair Will, use the discount code Meaningful20. I'll put it on the screen here. Meaningful20 to get 20% off the fees at Fair Will, which is a pretty big deal, actually. That's a big chunk off an already very low cost. Now, please note, this isn't an affiliate deal. I don't get anything if you go to Fair Will, but you get 20% off, so make the most of that. I just think it's a great option for many people, particularly in the times we find ourselves in now. So get a will written. It's the basics, right? It really is. Even if it takes you time to plan through all this sort of stuff, you can get a very simple will written very quickly, and it's worth having that rather than nothing at all. So number 3, understand tax. I think it's helpful to have an understanding, even if it's a high-level understanding of the tax system around legacy planning. Now, to do so here would take a long time, and you'd be bored, and probably so would I. So what follows is a kind of a whistle-stop tour of the highlights, okay? It's been a while since I've even looked at inheritance tax as part of the podcast, so I might have to rectify that before too long. But inheritance tax is the biggie. That's the main one we're concerned with. And quite simply, when you die, everything you own is added up. Anything you owe is taken off, and then whatever's left is kind of added up, right? That's your sort of taxable estate, potentially. Now, if what you've got is more than a certain figure, which is called the nil rate band, then inheritance tax is charged at 40% on everything over that. Now, 40% is quite steep, right? But fortunately, there are many exceptions and exemptions. So, for instance, if you leave everything to your spouse or civil partner, there's never any inheritance tax to pay, right? Important though, our society still rewards commitment. So you're going to need a marriage certificate or a civil partnership certificate to apply for that, for that to apply to you. A common law partnership, even if you live together for 40 years, just won't cut it. This system that we live in rewards marriage and now civil partnership, fortunately. Now, the tax-free amount, that nil rate band, is £325,000 per person. So if your estate is more than that, you'll pay some tax. If you're married or in a civil partnership and you leave everything to each other, then on the second death, your partner gets your nil rate band. It's called the transferable nil rate band. So they then would only pay inheritance tax on their estate if it is valued above £650,000. 2 lots of the nil rate band. Then there's an additional nil rate band called the residence nil rate band, and that is currently £175,000 per person. It applies if you have your own property. There are all kinds of rules about how it applies. It might not apply to you at all if your estate is over £2 million. There are stipulations about leaving your house to direct descendants. That might rule out leaving property in trust. So, it's complicated. It's never as simple as it immediately seems. Now, you can make gifts before you die, but in order to stop people giving everything away on their deathbed, there are timing issues. So, for instance, you have to live 7 years after the date of gift for there to be no inheritance tax implications at all from making the gift. If you die within 7 years, there may be tax to pay. There are other exemptions, such as the small gifts exemption, which says you can give as many gifts of less than 250 quid per person as you want. No implications from that. Crucially, really important one, the gifts from income exemption that says as long as a gift is made regularly and it doesn't impact your standard of living, you can give without limits from your income. So you couldn't sell down, bang the microphone, you couldn't sell down your share portfolio to use that rule. It has to come from income. You can make one annual gift of up to £3,000, and that can be divided between donees, so £1,000 to each of your 3 kids, say. There's no implications if you do that. And then there are rules about giving for special occasions, such as weddings. There are other exemptions if you own agricultural or business property, and the latter can include shares in a qualifying company. So that's particularly beneficial to small business owners, and agricultural property relief is useful for farmers. And we're not even getting started on trusts. They have their own set of rules. Trusts are incredibly powerful vehicles for making sure your wishes are carried out, but they always require some sacrifice. More on that next week. So it's important, I think, to have a handle on this. And as I say, it's a long time since I've dedicated an episode to it, so perhaps I'll do that just to put a pin in the subject and I can direct people to that episode. But the problem is the tax rules change so frequently. But get to know the tax rules around the subject. It's actually quite a bit simpler than it might seem. I've rattled that off very quickly, but those are essentially your main points. Remember, though, the starting point is your wishes. Then you have to navigate the system, and you can get professional help with that if needed. Start with you, then we navigate the system and the tax and all that. Final thing I'm going to say today is not to neglect lasting powers of attorney. Because, while you're spending all this time working out your wishes for after you've gone and even establishing legacies and making gifts while you're alive, you should also make provision for what might happen if you can't direct your own wishes anymore, right? As cheery as it doesn't sound, today might be your last day of being mentally capable to do anything. A stroke while you're in your sleep tonight, rapid onset vascular dementia, nasty accident in the car might mean that your wishes never get outworked because you don't have the capacity to see them through. And there's a fix for that. It's called the lasting power of attorney for your property and financial affairs. And while you're at it, get the lasting power of attorney for health and welfare too, which gives another person the ability to make decisions for your long-term medical care. So I did a 5-Minute Friday on LPA, so I'll make sure there's a link to that in the notes. But having a lasting power of attorney in place, combined with clear direction for your attorneys in writing, will go a long way to making sure that whatever you want to happen before you pass away actually does happen. So really, really important. Okay, I reckon we've laid the groundwork today for some more practical stuff next week. And I'm going to sort of give you some insight into using trusts and your will to establish some multi-generational planning opportunities. Should be fun. Okay, right, review this week from Cheza10. Who says, great podcast. I love listening to this podcast. It helps the everyday man or woman pay attention to where their money is going. Pete gets his message across without being condescending, like a lot of professional advisors can be. I know, right? This is a must listen for me every week. Paul, thank you so much, Cheza10. Really appreciate you taking the time to leave a review. If you like what you're hearing here, do leave me a review, meaningfulmoney.tv/iTunes. If you're sort of an Apple person, but wherever you're listening to me, if you can leave a review or like a star rating or whatever, please do that. It massively helps. Keeps the show near the top of the rankings, which means people can see it and can subscribe. So thank you in advance for that. Okay, again, don't forget, Meaningful Academy is open for phases 1 and 2. Phases 3 have been sort of delayed a little bit because of my recent fatigue issues. So they're open for phases 1 and 2, which is the financial foundations phase if you're getting started, and the build wealth phase, which is all about investing and planning for the future and includes access to the amazing Voyant Go app. So those are ready and open for you. If you're particularly interested in phase 3, which is going to be about retirement planning, then you can head to meaningfulacademy.com and click to register your interest, and we'll keep you posted. So when you go to meaningfulacademy.com, you've got a choice: financial foundations, build wealth, and retirement planning. Choose which is of interest. First 2 are open now, and the retirement planning will be open in a few weeks. Also, every Friday, well, not for the last few weeks while I've been on my chin strap, but every Friday I send out the Meaningful Digest email, planning to start that again next week. It's just a summary of what's been going on at Meaningful Money throughout the week, plus some useful links and my general musings about whatever I fancy talking about. But there's thousands of people get that email every Friday. Feedback is always great. So if you want to get that, head to meaningfulmoney.tv. Click towards the top of the page. A little drop down comes after you've been there about 5 seconds and just invites you to join the mailing list. Okay, folks, that is it. Next time, as I said, we're going to be continuing with our megasode on legacy planning. Any questions before then, get them in quick on this episode's show notes, meaningfulmoney.tv/RP9 for retirement planning episode 9. Hope you enjoyed it, folks. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you next week. Cheers.